bumps midway.
Yeah, then we'll like.
Just let me know.
Also, it affects the.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe then put it down. I guess.
So you really, I almost always lower them.
Probably just that third window. Yeah, please.
Trying to get Teresa as much vitamin D as possible.
Thank you. I need all the help I can get these days.
He radiates without the sun on her.
Well, thank you. Thank everyone for being here to the City of Philomath's Finance and Admin Committee meeting on February 8th, 2024. We will first get started with a roll call. I'll just note that Councilor Nielsen and Councilor Andrade are both with us, as are City Manager Chris Workman and Mike Brzezinski and City Recorder Ruth Post. First, we'll go ahead and get started with the approval of minutes.
I'll move.
Got a motion made by Councilor Nielsen. I can second that motion. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. We got a number of items on the business on the calendar today. We have discussion of the budget calendar, a review of our audits from last year, a preliminary review of our utility rates. We're going to postpone the capital improvement plan, is my understanding, and then talk about an amendment to the municipal code. So first, Mike, do you want to kick us off with the discussion of the budget calendar?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. I gave the committee a copy of the budget calendar for next year or this year, however you want to look at it. And then I pulled out the key dates for everybody that this is what affects you the most. And if you like to do is just put it out to you for any comments, or if we need to change dates or anything, and do you feel comfortable with the dates? And the rest of it, is what we do internally. We just keep track of. It's my way of keeping track of the process. So that's what I wanted to give to you, and then we'll take it to council for final approval next week. Did you see anything wrong with the dates? I'll take that as a no, and we'll just kind of move on then, because we do have a lot to do. The next thing I gave to the committee is basically we're going to review the audit from last year. What I did is I pulled out 4 key things. Basically, the financials. We finished the year in a positive position on all funds. The only one I'm really concerned on is the water fund, and we'll talk about that when we get to the rates. I think we'll solve part of it, and we'll do most of it. We did everything we had for all the GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles. Say that 4 times real quick. And then gas, which is generally accepted auditing. This is auditing. So that's what we have to live with. We had no problems there. The one thing that I wanted to talk about is there's a governance letter in there. That is for the council. That is from the auditor committee or auditor to the audit to the council, saying, hey, this is what we did for the audit, and then there's something that Chris and I signed. This is what we did to complete the audit. There was no, we got along great. There was no, their big thing is they want to get along, we do. And so they would write us up if we didn't. So that's the governance letter. And usually they sent, in Newport, they sent it to the counselors, whereas here, they're comfortable of us putting it in your package for next week. You can read that when you have a chance. Then we had the single audit, which they audited our water treatment plant revenues for the ARPA, and they gave us a significant deficiency because we did not follow the guidelines of reporting. I just told them, it's like, okay, you're out there looking for something to report, that's fine. Chris and I put together, I will do my reporting, and there's one other report that we have to work with. Chris and I have to work with the city engineer, and it is an annual report. And basically, we're so far ahead along, we're about the only city or county that's far along in the process, in this ARPA process monies. So we're running into the blocks and trying to figure them out as we go. So that's what we ran into here. We didn't realize we had a reporting guideline. So we fixed it. So there's a compliance report that I filled out. This was not a financial issue that has to be taken to council. This is something that I can report on and say, this is what we're going to do, and it's at the back of the financial reports. The other thing that we went through, they go through the working compliance rules. On page, I think it's 86 or 87, I don't know which one. They have items where they talked about what we, hang on, I'll get there. It's part of your report. It's on page 85 of the financial report. They basically said, we had some expenditures in excess of appropriations basically we exceeded budget. What happened there is I made a change at the end of the year and I wasn't paying attention and I moved stuff I shouldn't have moved. And so I tried to fix it, but it was too late. And so they wrote me up, which, okay, I take that one on me. Now the other one is the urban renewal and sewer funds budgeted debt service. When I created the resolution for appropriations, I didn't separate the debt. I put it into materials and services. They're being auditors. I went, okay, it's all the same. You know, our operations are fine. It's just when I did my resolution, I didn't break it out. Capital outlay, materials and services, debt service. I just had it all lumped in together. I've already fixed that on my resolution for next year or this year. And then the published budget. Chris did a budget message. I forgot to put it in the published document. We could have fixed it, but they're looking for things to report on. Okay, we can live with that.
And that typically is done. The budget message is always a part of it.
That's the first thing Chris will do. That's what kicks off, you know, besides us finding a chair and all that. The next thing, when we start the process, he will do a budget message. I should have got his written thing, put it in the budget booklet that I published, and I didn't. So we can fix that. The other thing, there's lack of competitive process for the West Tech. They keep picking on West Tech. So we're currently going out for an RFP just to say we've done it. It's a best practice, kind of like what I'm doing with the auditors. It's a best practice thing. They had not done it since 1995, so the auditors just found something to pick on. So, you know, after 2 times of us saying something, we're going to deal with it. The last thing that they gave us a management report on was on, I do the journal entries monthly, annually, quarterly, and so on, and I don't have anybody reviewing them. So they wrote us up on that, so Chris and I are going to put together a program where he and Chelsea will review my journal entries, all my month-end data, so there's another set of eyes looking at it. And so they gave us a letter. That's the management letter for that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is the beginning fund balances. Like I said, the only one I'm worried about is the water position, the water fund. We budgeted $47,000. We came in $42,000 negative, so it's a $90,000 swing. So we'll talk about that, like I said, within the utility rate report. I know that's a quick overview. If you want details on each individual in the financials, I've got things bookmarked on my page. If y'all want me, I can send you a little report on what I think within the financials is something you might be interested in. Otherwise, do I have any questions on that quick presentation?
I'll just mention that it's pretty hard to follow along. The page numbers aren't easy to follow. A lot of them aren't numbered. So it's kind of difficult to follow along and, or, they're not necessarily titled the way that they're talking about them.
Okay.
But
But that email, Chaz, that email that from Jody Birch kind of summarized as well on the back of
It
the
does, yeah.
memorandum. So that was helpful to look and see.
That's why I gave you that.
Yeah.
I feel, and they gave you kind of a generic in the book, but Jody explained to me, so we could kind of, with our talking point. So I figured they didn't mind sharing that with council and with the committee. So.
And then I'll also just mention in the table that shows the finances, we are not privy to or familiar enough to know what City Code 10 is, what fund that is, what 16 or 21 is. So it would be helpful to kind of provide or translate that for us.
Believe it or not, Mr. Mayor, I have one sitting on my desk, count on my computer. I'll
I'm
give
sure.
you all. Okay.
I'm just gonna, I can't put my video on because my Wi-Fi is really bad and I can't get like a hard line, unfortunately. But you had said that you were concerned about the water fund. Is that something that is part, I guess you had mentioned it in the context of the audit. Could you elaborate on that? I don't know if that's going to be different from what we would be talking about later when we talk about utility rates.
Well, what I discovered, Counselor, is when you made the cut way back in I don't know when you made it. It was January of one year. You cut the base rates, and I noticed that our beginning fund balance prior to that was like about $900,000. Then the year after we cut the rates, it was down to like 600. Now, basically, what happened is we dug in to the beginning fund balance, and because we're funding the water treatment plant, I moved all the money last year out to put it over into the construction fund, so it's there. We don't have to worry about it this year. And what it did is it put us in a negative position. And so when I did the utility rates, I did a deeper analysis to see where we are. And I'm kind of talking about the utility rates right now. When I did my review of the base rates, I did a quick calculation on the base rates for all the meters within the town, figuring the 3/4 was $13, and so on.
Mike, should we postpone that detailed conversation for that agenda item?
If you like, but that's kind of where, so the counselor can see, this is kind of, I found out what happened and I started doing an analysis. Yes, we might want to hang on to that conversation. But
Okay, Councilor Andrade.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if there was something additional, if there was additional context within the audit portion of it. So
no, that's just what happened there is, I showed you, we overspent. We didn't overspend our budget. We dug into too much of the our revenues didn't cover our expenditures, but it didn't put us in a bad position. I mean, we had enough to cover us cash wise. It's just we do a lot of accruals at the end of the year, and when those accruals against the revenue put us in a negative position.
thank you. And then can you elaborate on the West Tech? Is it just the non-compete bid? Like, is it just that I know that the city has used West Tech for a really long time and I guess, can you elaborate on what it is that is quote unquote wrong that is actually okay?
We've been doing is we've been living on a 1995 memo saying it's okay to do what we did. But in the world of the government world, in the last 15, 20 years, they've come up with best practices. So we haven't gone out, we can't prove to them we've gone out in the last 10 years, or we have a master contract with them. So that's kind of what they're picking on us about, where we just don't have a contract. Or we can't prove that we've done an RFP for a best practice, just to see what's out there. You know, we're not saying, it's just like the audit, if I use my auditor RFP, I'm inviting the auditor we had last year. I'd love to have them back, but you know, I want to see who else is out there. So it's just, that's kind of what they're looking at, Jessica.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any additional questions about the audit? And Mike, you don't need any action from us. We're just going to pass this on to the council, and that's where we'll be having a motion, right?
Yeah, we're just moving it on. If you're, let's see if you have any questions. How do you want me to approach the council with it? Is there anything you want me to do differently? Or is this okay the way I presented it to you all?
I would say that
Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
I was just say that doing the overview, I think it would be really helpful to state what page or what memo you're referencing, or if you want us to be on that email, like telling us what you're talking about, just so that we know how to follow the conversation would be helpful for me anyway.
Okay, will do.
I know it's a bit last minute, but I could see using that email, there was only so much I could kind of put two and two together between it all of like what is actually okay. And it's just like, you know, a nitpicky thing versus, oh, that's something like forgetting to put the budget message into so into the packet or whatever. So that email, if that's kind of listed out as like with each issue, like on a, and then line that up with an explanation next to it of like, and like for instance, the whole thing with the West Tech, like giving that additional information of, you know, we haven't gone to bid competitively for a while now because we were using this 1995 memo, but now there's been new, you know what I mean? To try to kind of help.
I think I follow you. I think you want it like a layout, follow each bullet point. I'll just,
Yeah.
what I could do is I could grab it out of the audit,
Hmm.
and then I could just I could cut and paste out of the email and put it into each bullet. Is that something you'd like to see?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure I understand what you just described, but I was even just thinking a table basically of like on the left side, here's the quote unquote deficiency or violation or whatever. And then on the right hand side, like this is how we addressed it and why it's not a big issue or, you know,
Okay, I
or,
follow you. I know
or
what
whatever.
you're talking about. We're saying the same thing, different contexts. I
Gotcha.
gotcha.
Okay. Then whatever works best. Thank you.
Okay. Chris?
I was just gonna ask, is it helpful for the council to have all of the individual letters, or is that a little bit overkill for what you're looking for?
I think we could make it, for me, I think we could make it available to them, but having to go over, I mean, it would definitely, we need to go over the deficiencies, and that needs to be clear. But I don't know if we need to, I mean, make it available, but maybe not cover the entire audit.
Agreed.
Okay.
I think just a brief explanation of changes and what is being done to rectify and
Okay, thank you for that. Mike, let's go ahead and talk about the water utility rates.
Okay. Get everything kind of laid out here. This is a preliminary review of the utility rates, utility fees, rates and fees. we started out, I pulled all the CPI information out that we needed for the payroll. Basically, what I do is I get the payroll and I put that together, and then I do a preliminary budget for the people that, the funds that need the fees and the rates. We discovered that the CPI for, as of December, it's going to be, it was 3.6. Our union contracts or the CBAs have a 3.5 maximum, so we're building a budget, payroll budget with 3.6. The engineer news and record, or news and review, ENR, we use that for the fees, and that came in this year 2.58. For budgetary purposes, we're going to knock it down to 2.5 just to keep this. The 0.08 really adds an extra wrinkle. Chris and I just said, we're just going to cut it down to 2.5. Makes it a little bit easier on our calculations. I did a review on all the volume rates and the ending. I did first thing I did here is I got the revenues and the expenditures, the ending fund balances, so you can see that the water balance, ending fund balance was 42 in the hole. Sewer fund is in a good shape. The revenues, I think water is kind of flattened out a little bit, whereas sewer is still on an increase. And you can see that the income balances will follow that. However, our expenditures within the water fund have gone from 900,000 to 1.2. So that's something that we didn't really, we saw it, but we thought we could cover it. We didn't. In my review, my first thing I did is I said, okay, the volume rates are good. Volume, that covers our capital outlays, our ending fund balances, and our contingencies. The base charges covers our base fees. Our base fees cover our personnel, materials, and services. That's our operating costs. And like I said, I started to talk about what I did is I took all the meters in the town and assumed that, okay, each one of these is 3/4, here's 3/4, I'm going to charge it this rate. And then a 1-inch read, I'm going to do this. Then I did it for the commercials. I downloaded all the data and I applied all the fees to it, or the rates. And what we came up with, right now we have our expenditures for the operating budget for water is $1.1 million. And my calculations came in at $300,000. So we're not covering our fixed cost. And then what I did, I dug back further and just to see, okay, where did this start? And this started way back when we cut back the rates back in January of 2021 or something like that. I don't remember the last date. However, we were able to cover that because our beginning fund balances were high enough to cover it. I know I'm picking on water, but water leads to sewer, leads to stormwater. It's our big key item. So what I found, in order to get back to covering our beginning fund, our fixed costs, we'd have to increase the base rates or base charges by 67%. Told Chris that, and Chris said, that's a perfect world. I'm going, I totally agree. I know that's a perfect world. And then I said, the first thing I told him, I said, we need to get this rate study done. That'll give us information that'll kind of back us up, give us information to move forward, kind of set us on a plan. When we did this in Newport, I thought about this the other day after I talked to Chris. We found out the same thing. Our base rates were not high enough to cover our fixed costs, but we knew we couldn't do it at the 67% over 1 year. That would just be impossible. So they were on an 8-year cycle to increase it. So that's something that the rate study will come out with and tell us about it when it's time. So basically, what I'm recommended, I've played around with the numbers. And I figured 15% instead of the 67%. That came out to like $2 or $3 per for the residential rates. That'll go from $13 to $15. that's the 3/4 rates. Majority of our meters are in the residential and they're in the 3/4 range. So they're going to be a $2 increase. And then I gave you a chart. It's on the 3rd page of the report. It's called base charge and volume increases. It's attachment A. So you can kind of see what I did with the 15%. I applied it to I did that to the base charges and also the volume. Chris and I figured what we could do on volume. We were gonna use the 2.5. We didn't have really a number to use, so we figured, okay, we can do the 2.5 ENR. We've got that. We can use that as percentage to increase the volume rates. So the attachment A, what it shows you exactly what I've come up with, and what I'm thinking with the budgetary, this will pull us closer to reality. We'll still be able to do some transfers to water and sewer. Sewer's going to be okay. Water is something we're just going to have to watch for the next couple of years and just become conscious of that. So that's my quick overview on that. We've looked at all the other fees. We're just going to concentrate on the utility fees and the rates. We're not going to do like the turn off fees or anything like that. We're not going to touch those issues.
Mike,
Go ahead.
maybe we can pause, let the folks ask some questions.
Sure.
Anyone have a question? I know I have questions, but I let others go first. Councilor Andrade?
Yeah, I know we talked about this last year and I don't know how, but I completely forgot. Can you please remind me of what the factor of 0.5 is again? And like why it's that as opposed to times the number of units for a multifamily unit?
Chris, I'm going to leave that one for you. That's the multi-units. They have a factor of 0.5. I don't want to guess that one. Remember the...
Yeah, so it's really a matter of, there's quite a bit of cost savings on a multifamily compared to, I guess the best way to look at it is there's definitely cost savings in providing water to 15 units that are all in one building as opposed to 15 individual buildings with water infrastructure and hookups and meters and all of those things to service 15 individual homes as opposed to one meter that's servicing 15 dwelling units. And so there's no great way to find that measurement other than to do what was recommended us by the engineer years ago, which is to take the total number of units and take half of the total number of units and use that as the base.
Because
it's an approximation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also I really do think that we should consider removing that factor or increasing that factor because it is ridiculous how much we're charging for utilities. And looking at some other cities, I've noticed that they don't have the factors for the multi-residential. But yeah, I would be interested in seeing what, like, taking that into consideration, like how that would change what the utility rates and base fees might look like.
So I have a question. So for me, is there a way for us to guesstimate how much the average family would have a change in their normal everyday utility bill? That's what I mean. These figures I understand. I've got $6.25 here, $2, $3.90, 10, so on and so forth, differences. But
We could probably take yours and do a comparison.
so
It's less than $10 if you are less than 5 units of water.
Okay, right. Okay, that's
It's closer to like 8 or 720 or something like that for 3 and 4.
So
I'll
what I'm
just-
handing out, and I'll just kind of talk through it, is your kind of average household we look at is using 8 units of water. It's about 2 units of water per person, family of 4, household of 4. So just to spell it out, because I know that the mayor and Councilor Ondari can't see, current base unit's $13. The proposal is $14.95, rounded up to $15. So for 8 units, your bill would go from $42.40 up to $43.60.
Clarify, that's not including any of the other fees or the sewer rates, correct?
Right, that was just for water. For sewer, it goes from, again, for 8 units of water, for sewer it goes from $54.40 up to $56.
But then when you add it all together, it ends up being well over $100. Because that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like when you look at all of it together, it is way too much money
So
for a
storm
bill.
drain, yeah, so storm drain goes from $320 to $330, and the street utility fee goes from $845 to $870. So total for a family of 4, on average, is from $150.30 to $156.35. So it's a $6.05 increase per month for a household of 4.
That doesn't make any sense because it's an $8 increase for if you were to use 4 units or 5 units, excuse me. So it should be more than that because you're not taking into account street fee and stormwater fee, correct?
The utility fee is going from $845 to $870.
Can Ruth put this on so that on the screen so they can see this? I don't think, do they have this document in front of them?
No.
Okay.
No. Did you put this together, Mike?
I did this.
No.
Or do you have it digital?
I do, but I can't get into that. My computer is not being very cooperative right at the moment, and I can't get into it.
Yeah.
So, seeing this document, I'm understanding what this is saying, but you're saying these increases are on a how many year thing? So we'll have to increase every year for so many years to get us where we need to be. Is that what I understood?
No, this is just something, we did this until we can get to the utility rate.
Okay.
We know we need to raise the rate.
Okay.
Like I said, I played with the numbers because I kept going against the projected budget.
Right.
And 15% will hold us until we get the rate study. There is no, I was just using an example of what we did in Newport because we had to raise it up. We knew we were short.
Right.
So they didn't, and we could not, nobody could afford to do it. So we did it over time.
And speaking when people talk to me when I about talking and as a city councilor, there are still concerns about
I just
money.
emailed it to Jasmine.
Okay, money is tight for families. I was talking to a lady just the other day who lives I was on a walk, and she knows I'm on the council, so she said, "So, water?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "They were concerned that because of our streetscapes project with all the sprinklers and things that are going along the roads, that was going to increase. We would have to increase city water to cover all the workings of the water that we'd be expending on the streetscape project." And she said, "Money is just so tight for us right now. We can't figure out how to budget more for utilities." And I said, "I will definitely keep that in mind when I go to my meetings." And I don't think this family is alone in that circumstance of these are hard times. And I know we have requirements to meet the city budget, but a part of me is concerned for those families that are struggling and that are, that increases are just going to make it, that much harder.
Yeah, it's never easy to raise utility rates. It's never anything that any council wants to do.
Right.
But the reality is, just as household expenses are going up, the expenses for the city are going up as well. And so you know, the options of not raising utility rates to keep up with cost of inflation and cost of construction, which are the two direct influences that are causing the need for the rates to need to go up. The alternative is you delay maintenance and you don't do ongoing projects, right? And so if we just stop maintaining our water system, we could save a substantial amount of money today, but it's going to end up costing us more money down the road. And that's not necessarily fair to, you know, future city residents because we've deferred maintenance or deferred capital projects that need to go in today. So you think you're getting ahead today and it feels good to pat yourself on the back and say we didn't raise rates, but the reality is you've really just kicked the can down the road, the proverbial can down the road. And, you know, for a long time, we've made a great effort to make sure that we stay on top of our maintenance so we don't fall into a situation where we're having to spend a lot of extra money or borrow extra money because we're now, you know, having pipes that are failing and we're behind. That type of maintenance is much more expensive and more costly and more demanding on the city when you've got to go out and borrow a whole bunch of money to do these maintenance projects as opposed to being proactive and taking care of them ahead of time. There is a long-term cost benefit to the city for slowly raising rates and keeping up with the cost of that construction. As unpopular as it is, it's always a tough discussion with council to look at raising rates. I think these are pretty modest. I mean, when you really look back and look at rates over the last 10 years, we had a substantial rate decrease in water when we found out we were getting the money from the state to build the treatment plant. Before that, rates were much higher than what they are today. And we were able to reduce the rates in recognition of the times we were in and the fact that we weren't going to have that additional funding to pay that debt service that fell in our lap. With the $12 million from the state legislature. So the council has been, I think, responsive to the actual needs and what we actually need to be bringing in. And again, short of not putting additional money into that landfill equipment fund and doing those transfers, which is needed for that maintenance, the really only alternative is to raise those rates a little bit every year. So this is really just that. We do know, and Mike, I appreciate Mike's acknowledgement with the rate study. We've talked about this for a couple of years now. I wish we were in a spot where the treatment plant was nearing completion and we could go out for that rate study right now, because that rate study would be able to take a more long-term look at our rates and do some double checking and figuring and maybe find a way to, you know, charge a little bit extra for that 21st unit than what you charge for the 20th unit. There's other things we can do in that rate analysis that frankly, you know, Mike and I just don't have the expertise and the overall view of everything that's happening in the market around us to be able to really hone in on that. It's going to take somebody coming in that has that expertise to do that rate study with the city. But until we know the actual cost of the water plant and the water reservoir to get completed, that study's not going to help us a whole lot. We really need to know what the total cost of that project were because they're so substantial before that rate study is going to do us a lot of good. So as Mike said, we're kind of taking a shot at the 15% just to make sure that we're balanced this year with an eye towards having a full rate study completed that we can then look to and have more of a long-term plan and know where the rate should be headed. But we, you know, I'm with Mike. I fully support his analysis and the recommendation that the rates have got to come up a little bit this year in order to stay ahead of things.
And
I have a
that
question.
makes sense. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Chess.
Well, I have a couple questions, but one of them is, would it be possible to move forward with the rate study now and then get their input on how that might change if we have a water treatment plant that costs $16 million versus $18 million? Like, could they just give us that formula so we'd be able to adjust it as needed?
They can. When I talked to Mike, he was saying that, you know, the rate study loan's probably a 5 to 8 month task to get somebody on board and to go through and look at everything. So we could do that, but we're still going to need to know where rates are going to fall for this next budget year.
Yeah.
I'm very confident in being able to budget for the rate study this year because I'm got some level of confidence that the treatment plant and reservoir are going to be completed by the end of the summer during this next fiscal year. But you know, that means that we're engaging with somebody to do the rate study come like September, October, that we start to engage with them. So by the time we get to this time next year, you know, we've got a much better idea and a much better picture where rates need to go, not just next year, but again, as Mike said, looking out 5-10 years from now, where we're headed.
Right. And then the other thing in the memo, and as you stated, talking about it would require a 67% increase of base charge in order to bring us into balance. And then you suggest that a 15% increase in base plus 2.5% in volume would bring us into balance. I think that statement is kind of incongruous, doesn't make sense. But that if it's a temporary, you know, what does that 15% buy us? Is it just a temporary thing that we're doing for a few months, and then we're going to be at a deficit of 50% later, or like, that is kind of confusing and doesn't really make sense to me.
On the volume charge that we make 1.2 to 1.3 each year, and our contingency is around 300,000. Then we've got a contingency or a transfer of we have 400 this year. And then I can't remember what the reserve was. I think it was 1.1. We just barely cover all that, and we've been living off of that the last couple of years. And what I'm trying to do is to get the base up instead of the volume up. The volume is what we've been living on the last couple of years. Plus we had a beginning fund balance that was carrying us forward. But we've been eating all that up, and now we got to the end. 67% was going to pull us up to even. Everything will be covered, and we'll have our beginning fund balance back. 42,000 negative is we don't have a beginning fund balance. That's what happened. It's really governmental accounting is really complex.
Well, and part of it too, if I could, Mayor, is you know, the tradition in Philomath has always been to look out for those smaller households where you're only using 3 to 4 units of water per month, and so by kind of artificially having a little bit higher capture of funds in the usage and a little bit lower proportional amount captured in the base charge, you're kind of helping those smaller households out a little bit more because their usage is going to be low and their base rate is artificially low as well, so it helps them out. When you raise the base rate, that base rate is going up and everybody pays it, whether you've got 2 people in the household or 10 people in the household. The base rate's going up and you're going to pay that base rate, and then your usage obviously is based on how much you're actually using. So typically more people in the household means a higher usage number. So we've kind of artificially, and the city of Philomath is not alone in this. It's very common when you look at utility rates. It's very common for cities to want to have their basic kind of monthly expenses paid for with that base rate. So if we do no improvements, just to cover staffing and just very, very basic infrastructure, we want the base rate to cover that. And then, you know, usage is going to then pay for our expansions and our, you know, large replacement projects. But as Mike said, that's kind of a false perfect world, right? That doesn't really happen because every city relies heavier on the usage than they do on the base rate, than what that kind of picturesque perfect world would otherwise tell you that you should do. And again, when we have the consultants come in and talk through that, that's what you'll hear from them as well, is if you just did the base rate, it'd have to be clear up here. That's not reasonable. It really puts a heavier burden on these smaller households. And so you're going to see some compromise there where that base rate is recommended to be quite a bit lower with a volume rate a little bit higher to make up that difference. So again, I don't think we're that unusual than what most cities are doing there. We do have a tradition of maybe being at a little more extreme where our base rate has been very, very low compared to our volume rate just to help those smaller households. The other point I'll add on to that is I think there's a false assumption there that your smaller households are somehow lower income. And I would argue, I don't know that that necessarily holds true when you look at the demographics of Philomath anymore. A lot of the more wealthy households in Philomath are smaller households, right? The retired couple that has the house, or the now empty nesters whose kids have all flown the coop and they've, both working or both employed still, and you've only got a household of two, but yet their revenue is greater than, especially per capita, is much greater than, say, a household of 6 or 7, which inclines, a younger family that's got more expenses and maybe isn't as far up the chain as far as the career ladder goes. So, I think there is a false assumption that a small household means a low-income household that needs to be subsidized in some way. I just don't know that holds true with our demographics anymore. In fact, it may be the opposite. The very opposite is true, that those smaller households should be paying a greater portion of that than what they traditionally have.
If I could just ask, I just want to clarify one thing. It seems a little discerning that in 2020 we had a water ending balance of 639,000, and then to 2022, 2 years later, we have a deficit. That to me seems like a lot of change in just 2 years.
Right.
And from what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, it's because we did some shifting of water rates.
We dropped the base rates.
Right, and
Yeah.
just that drop that we did made that much of a difference in 2 years?
Yes.
Yeah, and we need to look. Some of that is transfers.
Yeah, a
too.
lot of it, like I said, we moved a lot of this to the water, or the construction fund for the water treatment plant. So it's the charge went down. That was part of it, but we also, like Chris said, we moved money over to the construction fund. And yeah, that's the two items.
We could add those numbers in too, because that is a
Yeah.
little maybe misleading. I think it would help to see what the transfers were in
Yeah.
those last 2 or 3 years as well.
When
Because
you're
that's the
talking
rest
to
of the
when
story.
you go before the city council, that's gonna be something that I think we should clarify.
Yeah, I guess is it to piggyback off of that, like, is it just that the water treatment plant's been costing a lot more money than we initially thought? Or it's like literally we're not getting that as much revenue for whatever reason?
It's a combination
Yeah.
of the two. I think when we see the transfers, won't be as concerning, but again, where I started is we can't just stop making transfers either. We
Right.
do need to still transfer money over. We are still in the midst of large construction projects, and we have additional projects that we need to do as well. Now, again, granted, when we look at the 3-year project list of things we'd like to do, there's a few things on there that we could put off, right? And so maybe we look a little bit closer at transfers and we put some of those other water projects off. That, again, some of them are fairly small. The one I think of off the top of my head is the aquifer storage recovery. It wasn't a large ticket item. I think $15,000, something like that, to do some inquiry to see if we can convert our 11th Street well into an aquifer storage recovery system. There's a few smaller projects in there, but really this is about the water treatment plant and the reservoir and getting those two projects done, knowing what any outstanding debt's going to be there, what that total project cost was, getting that paid for, and then we're going to know, very clearly what our future looks like, because we've got a very good idea of what those future water projects are going to be, and they're nowhere near the cost of what we're incurring right now. So I think if there's some uncomfortable about raising the rates a little bit, I guess I would just say to have some confidence that from the staff level, we're looking at what's the minimum we need to do to get by this year, knowing that we're going to have a full study completed before we have to look at rates next year. And it's going to be able to tell a better story then. There's just too many unknown variables right now for us to make, a 5-year or 10-year plan right now and where we need it. Honestly, crystal ball, I don't think that this 15% increase today is going to be, when we're at this sitting point next year looking back, I feel very comfortable that 50% is going to look like it was a good idea and that was the review that put us in the right direction we need to be going. I don't see where we're going to need to be making large substantial increases to water rates in the next few years. But I think what Mike is saying is we've not done any real substantial increases for the last multiple years other than a significant decrease in what we were charging. So we need to correct that just a little bit, get us back on, and then again, look for a more comprehensive long-term plan going forward. And again, we want our utility customers to have some confidence in our projections and where we need to be as well. But again, just right now with the treatment plant and the reservoir, there's just a lot of unknowns right there.
Now,
One thing I wanted to actually mention and see if my thinking on this is aligned with others, but Council Andrade brought up the factor of a 0.5% discount or a 50% discount on multi-home thing. If we were to remove that, my assumption is that the residents would then have their rates increased to cover those costs. It's not going to hit the owner of that property. And it seems to me that those people would be the lower income folks and that they would be then disproportionately impacted. Am I wrong in that thought, or?
I think you're exactly right. Yeah, they're not going to take lower profit at the apartment complex because the water rates went up. They're going to pass those directly on to their tenants. And again, I think when you look at those numbers, which we can look at them a little bit closer, I think the study will be more helpful, but what we also don't want to disproportionately charge them more than what they should be getting charged relative to other types of development. It's not a 50% discount. It's really taking the total number of units divided by 2 to find their base rate. So It's not discounting it. It's how do you calculate the base rate? And that's the formula for calculating that. If we charge them the full 100%, we essentially would be overcharging them compared to or relative to a single family household.
And that makes sense to me because if you're going to shut off my water, you're going to shut off my water. You're going to send out a guy to do that. If you're going to shut off water at the apartment complex, you're not going to shut off 365 units. You're going to shut off one valve.
It's the meters, it's the billing, it's the maintenance. There's a whole list of things where, again, it's just a lot less expensive to provide water to one unit with 15 dwelling units in it than 15 individual homes. And it's significant. So
thank you for that.
When we go through the full study, I think we can look at that closer, but I don't think you're going to see a significant amount more money that comes in, and I do think it would disproportionately affect people living in apartments.
To that point, though, like so here's where I feel like there is some contradictory statements that have been made. If there are more lower income people in multi-unit housing, then and from what I understand, they're not necessarily like big multi-unit, or like they don't have many rooms, so there's like only so many people. Like you're not necessarily going to find a family in some of the apartment complexes, correct? Like a big family.
That's true. We have quite a few 2 and 3 bedroom apartment complexes.
Oh, really? Okay, I thought they were mostly one. My bad.
I think that
there's families.
Even the newest, I think the Oak Springs apartments are 1 and 2 bedroom units, but the Boulevard apartments are 1, 2, and 3 unit.
I think finding a 1-bedroom apartment is hard to.
You heard Chris talk about that.
Well, either way, if I understand correctly, in the apartments, you're going to have like 1 or 2 or however many of those larger lines. And you're not keeping track of what each individual household is using, how much water they're using. Is that correct?
Right.
So they are, let's see, if they're not, yeah, I guess I just, never mind. I'll have to think about that some more.
Thank you. Councilor Nielsen,
Yeah, I do, the rate survey would be a really wise idea if we can figure out a way to do that in a timely manner. I'm still uncomfortable knowing what I know with the community of those that are struggling and financially, so that this is hard for me, but based on that hope of a rate survey and the needfulness of maintenance of our water systems, I move that the Finance Administration Committee recommend to the city to approve the utility rates. Do I need to do that? As presented effective July 1st, 2024? Is that what I need to do here?
We need to take them to council for final
Okay.
approval.
Okay.
We recommend them.
That I recommend that we take this to council for final approval. Hard one, but
I'll-
I do think it needs to go forward.
I will second that. Any further discussion?
If I could just
All
add,
in
Mayor,
favor?
Mayor,
Go
if I
ahead.
could real quick, just not to belabor, but we do, you know, for the households that are in that situation, we do still have the low income rates in there. There are, there's a state program still that they're eligible for, and our staff does a great job. You know, if people get to a point where water's looking like it needs to get shut off, our employees are terrific about reaching out, talking about other programs. We contribute money to Vina Moses and We Care every year, and those funds can be utilized as well. So as much as we need to raise the rates, we're also very, I think, helpful in families that do need the assistance and offering the lower rate and offering, you know, state programs that are going to help
And
those
that-
households.
And that's prior to the shut off, correct?
Yes.
Not after the shut off, but prior to the shut off.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're really good about it. CSC is also a great partner too.
Yes, yes, we recommend.
Thank you for that reminder, Chris. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that in addition, there be another proposed rate list without the factor of 0.5 for the multi-residential because, or never mind, that's the end of the motion. And I can explain why if I get a second. Okay, I guess there's no second.
So, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Aye. All opposed, please raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 2-1.
And one more thing before we move on. I will bring Newport, Albany, Lebanon, anybody else rates that you would like to see, because I did spend, before I even talked to Chris about this, I looked at the rates because I was going, this is crazy. So I compared, you know, what we have now against Newport and Albany, and we're way below on the base rates. Volume, we're pretty much on the same path. But I will bring those three unless y'all want to bring somebody else.
You bring Corvallis. That's the,
Okay, Corvallis. Corvallis, they got some weird stuff though, but I'll bring them.
Very weird rate structure,
Yeah, they do.
they're set up different, but
depending on whether you're
Um,
Uh-huh, right, exactly.
And then also I'll just note that even though, so for 8 units, it's an increase of 8 units of water, it's an increase of $9.05 for water and sewer combined when you include the fees as well as like the rates for water usage and sewer usage. And even though that may not seem like a lot, it really is when you think that about how the overall utility bill will be $156.35. It is absolutely wild to me. And do we need a motion to fast track that rate study, or is that already being brought to the council?
That would be a city council thing.
Yeah,
I okay.
we'll address it when we're looking at the strategic plan. But it's in the strategic plan now. It's really just a matter of at what point do we have enough data that we can get a good study, and that is a
Mhm.
priority for staff. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
just
we're on the
cool.
same page there.
Thanks, because like I think that even we say we're going to have the water treatment plant and we'll be able to do a rate study next year, but we said that last year too. And I know that there's been a lot of unforeseen things with like the pad, the concrete pad for the water reservoir, and there's been a lot of holdups and stuff. But I'm just really concerned about our community members, and I think that, yeah, I don't know. I'm just very concerned.
Councilor Nielsen?
Thank you for all your work, though.
Would it be possible, if we pass this as a city council, would it be possible to make sure that maybe to have Brad possibly do some kind of article describing why we do some kind of or in the newsletter, why it is rates are going where they are, and
Sure.
so that to clarify and make sure, because there is talk amongst the community about streetscapes and the cost of that, and what we're doing is that what's going to happen to us down the road, and we don't necessarily want to tie utility rate increases to streetscape costs, correct? Or do we?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to really think through the impact of the streetscape project and the irrigated flower bed areas and how that's got a direct impact. I mean, there's some absolutely think through that. It's pretty marginal though. I mean, that's pretty small fray when you're talking about usage of water. The numbers just aren't going to be there. It's a pretty small, insignificant when you look at the amount of water that the mill's using, the school district's using, or the city's using to water the parks compared to what we're going to do on a drip system for the irrigation. Really pretty minor. So we can talk through that. I can do that exercise a little bit, but it's going to be pretty marginal. Yeah. But I understand the concern, right? It's
Yeah. Well, and when people are really being careful with their funds, they want to know that everything's being spent.
I think if we were building a new 300,000 square foot soccer field with irrigation lines, I think that might be a different consideration. But I think a drip irrigation system in these few flower beds that are on the highway are just a completely different. Yeah, I think it would be pretty minor.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. Everything that we do that we dictate the staff to, or we get a direction, sometimes we're like, oh, well, that's not that much money. But every single thing, hits the bottom line and ultimately costs funds. So every time we give them a priority, we're spending money, right? We have to think about that and be careful with that. The public trusts us with their tax dollars for sure. Mike, next item on the agenda.
The preliminary capital improvement plan review. I'm not ready. I just finished it this afternoon. Chris has not had a chance to look at it. I was hoping to have it, but it just didn't happen. So we'd like to schedule something next week. That's why we asked y'all to bring your calendars with you so we could set something up next week, hopefully. Even if we have to do everything remotely. So, Ruth, did you have any suggestions of what day? Or what's a bad day for everybody?
Bad day or good day?
Are we doing this right now, or did you want to do the nominating petitions first?
I'm open. I don't know.
Why don't we wait and do setting the next meeting date at the end of the agenda?
Okay.
Be thinking about.
Yeah.
I would just add the Public Works Committee has looked at it twice already, and they've gone through and picked through the list of projects that they support moving forward over the next 3 years. what Mike's been working on is where's the money coming from and what do the balances look like after each year going forward. So that's a report that's got finished up today that we'll be bringing back to the finance committee, because we want the finance committee's final approval of the financing that goes with each of those projects and where the funds are coming from for each of them. So that's what you'll be looking at. But like I said, the public work committee has seen it twice already. The list of projects is pretty solid.
Okay. And Ruth, are you going to talk us through the nominating petitions?
And I'm gonna come to the table so that I'm not yelling. Apologies. There. Alrighty, in 2020, the city charter was amended and the residency requirement was changed for the beginning of the 2022 election from 6 months to 12 months. Did not realize that in addition to the city charter, our nominating petition or code also had that information. So we just need to make that update from 6 to 12 months in section 2.15.010, section A, the very first line. That's pretty simple. That's just housekeeping. In reviewing this, I've always, when you're going to amend a section of the code, it's a good idea to read the rest of the code and see if there's anything else that needs to be updated. And as I was reading through the last section, time for filing petition, all of these instructions about what to do with petitions, what to do with deficient petitions, this is all covered in state rules. And we clearly say in the section before, we follow the state applicable rules. So I checked with Jim Brewer about that, and he agreed with me that we should just take all of that out. We're going to follow the rules because they periodically change them, and so it's better for our code not to be that specific. So I just wanted to be sure that the committee had a chance to see this, make a recommendation before we send it to the council for a meeting, because we need to have this cleaned up before election season in June.
So I recommend that it go to the council, if that's possible. Thank you, Ruth. That's good.
Second.
Okay, perfect. We have a motion made by Councilor Nielsen, second by Councilor Andrade. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ruth. Appreciate your keen eye on those details. Mike, you want to get something scheduled?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up my calendar.
Are you talking next week? Is that what you're thinking?
It would be great if we could do it next week, or
Monday night is council, Tuesday night is police committee,
And Wednesday night is grandchild for.
Thursday night is Samaritan Awards. That's next week, unless you want to meet on Friday night, Friday afternoon. Is afternoon?
I am unable to do anything after noon on Friday. I don't know. I have an appointment and I don't know when it's going to end.
And I'm unavailable Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Is there any flexibility earlier on Friday or no?
I could do something before noon on Friday.
About Thursday at 3 or 4 o'clock. Nope. What about
Nope.
Wednesday at 3 or 4 o'clock? Nope.
Tuesday afternoon.
Tuesday is police committee.
Oh, we've got all this. I've only got.
I can do Tuesday at any point in the day.
What does your Tuesday look like?
I've got I've got a 2 to 4 open.
2 o'clock on Tuesday the 13th.
I do.
Does that give you enough time?
Means I have to have it tomorrow. What are you doing tomorrow?
What about Friday morning?
Oh, Teresa's not available
Teresa's out.
Wednesday, Thursday.
Got it.
Oh,
I don't think she heard me.
That's it, that's it.
Baby coming on
Yeah,
Wednesday.
that's, yeah, I'm off.
Grandma.
I am doing the.
What
grandma
about
thing.
Tuesday, the 20th?
Tuesday at 2?
Oh, the 20th?
Oh, no, it's like
No,
this next Tuesday.
I was saying
I think
Tuesday, the 20th, since it sounds like this next week is out for everyone.
Well,
So
yeah,
that it
I think
gives
there's-
Mike some more time.
So I think they were still debating Tuesday, the 13th at 2 or 3 p.m. Is that the case or no?
No, I think Mike said he needed to get the thing done by tomorrow, and that's too little time because we have to have time to review it.
Right.
So that's why I'm suggesting Tuesday, the 20th.
20th, I'm good with that.
3 o'clock on Tuesday, the 20th.
Gives us time to get through it, because Chris and I are gonna, it's gonna take Chris and I some time to work through it.
We have a planning
I-
commission meeting at 6 p.m. that night.
What time?
I have to be done by 4 p.m.
Okay,
2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 20th.
is that good for everybody?
Works for me.
That gives us time to
Gives us time,
get it into the council packet for the following week.
Yeah.
So
that's what I'm thinking.
Is that 2 o'clock you said?
Let me just double check Chris's schedule. I have a doctor's appointment at 8 o'clock.
And that-
Other things on your calendar. I want to see what they are.
That was the 20th. correct?
Yep, at 2 p.m.
For all evening. Okay, so 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 20th. Going once.
Sounds like we got that scheduled.
Okay,
thanks for the extra
Okay.
time on those
Thank
extra
you.
meetings. Thank
thanks
you.
y'all.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
all. Meeting
Thank you.
adjourned. You all.